should be good and well behaved. All right, so we got that. Oh, boop-a-doop. Alrighty, folks, it looks like we are live. Welcome back to another live stream. This week, we are picking up right where we left off, talking about the new documentation design and implementation for CheatCode. So at this point, I think this is the 6th live stream, so we're pretty far into this. So if you haven't already, go ahead and go back to so it's youtube.com/cheatcodetuts. So if you're watching this on a device or something like that, youtube.com/cheatcodetuts. There's a live streams playlist up there, and the last 6 are in order. So if you go and look at that, you'll be able to see and catch up on where we're at and what we've been up to. So quick review for where we're at here. So at this point, we've got the design implemented in HTML and CSS, or at least the rough design. We've got some basic wiring to a backend. So we've got an API wired up here via GraphQL. So we're starting to pull in data for the docs and all that stuff. And now we're starting to get into the structure of the documentation. So if you don't remember last week, let's go ahead and jump in real quick. And we'll get back to what I just had on screen there. So if you don't remember, where we were at is getting this whole thing to work. And we had a little bit of a struggle, or I had a little bit of a struggle trying to get this to work. So what we're doing is saying testing, create new page, make sure this still works. We gotta wait for a build here. Goodness, that was a long build. Okay, so hopefully in production that's a lot faster. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, in that modal, go ahead and create a new page for the documentation. And remember, we've got 2 types of pages, and that's what we're gonna work through in part tonight. So we've got standalone pages that sit potentially at the top of the navigation, and then we have pages that belong to sections, which are like little subtitles. So if and I'm surprised I haven't done this yet. Let's pull up our docs. There we go. I was hoping that was in there. Oh, I'm not running it. Where is it? Oh, that's right. I changed the port. I was working on the CheatCode site, which I run on port 5000, and it was freaking out on me. There we go. Okay, so we've got our standalone pages up here at the top, and then we have these sections. So we have a section called components, and then underneath that section we have multiple pieces of documentation. So what we're going to do, or what we're trying to do, is make it so that back here, actually we gotta correct that link. I remember that from last time. Let's just hit the back button. So what we want to do from this page is say, okay, be able to create a brand new page that could be standalone or assigned to a section. We don't know, and we don't technically care yet. All we want to do is create a new draft page that we can add. And then, and this is what we haven't done yet, what we want to do is add it so that when we create the page, it's added to the top of this list automatically. So it's not assigned to a section. It's just saying, put it at the front of the line so that way you can reshuffle it or reorder it. So what we're going to do is add the page like we just saw. So we go in here, we type in a title. That redirects us to the page editor where we actually control the content for the page. But then what we're going to do is say, okay, back here, so if we come back here after we finished writing the page or after we just created it, what we're going to do is say, okay, well, we want to add that to the top of the list so that we can sort it. And then when we sort it, try and figure out, okay, are we assigning this to a section or are we just assigning this to the top level and then updating the database to make sure that it reflects it? So if we reload this page, or more importantly, if we reload our documentation, that page that we created shows up in the right place. And the reason I say it that way is interesting. So the thing that I realized, goodness, it had to be like 3/4 of the way through our last stream, was, oh, well, because remember, I was trying to do like this really complex nested, I don't know if it'll show up. Yeah, I had like docs tester. I was trying to basically mimic the CMS to behave exactly like the site will. So if we're on a top level page, we have something like this, and I hope this still works. It's in the memory. Yeah. So in the actual docs site, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we've got project, section, page. And if we're on a top level page like we were just on, so if we go back to introduction, then we just have that. I was trying to mimic that inside of the CMS, but I realized like, well, wait a minute. I don't care about that because all I want to do is say create a page, and then this UI is managing that structure for me. So it's a little bit different in that I don't need to have the structure up in my URL because I don't care. It's right in front of me with this GUI. The difference between this and this is that they don't have that structure, meaning the users who are going to be reading this. And so I realized, okay, well, we can do a little bit of a shortcut and just dump from creating a page straight into the page editor, save ourselves a lot of headaches. So what we want to do now is resolve the next step in that chain of events, which is saying, okay, well, once you've created a page, you have to organize that page. So that's one of the things that I want to talk through tonight. So something I did, because I realized like these streams were getting a little, because I would do these. And technically, I'm doing this at the end of a work day today, but I drank a bunch of coffee today, so I got a lot of energy. But I was realizing like, man, this is disorganized. I'm always just like pulling what we're going to do out of thin air. So what I did before we started tonight was came up with a list of to-dos. So this is an app that I've been using fairly recently called Linear, which is just like a issue tracker to-do list type of app. And I've organized some stuff in here. And what I wanted to do, so I've got add ability to create a new documentation section. So that would be wiring this modal up because I don't think we've done that yet. And that, to be clear, is creating one of these sections. So these are pages. This is a section. So we want to create pages and sections. So I've got that on the list. Edit the title of the documentation section. So up here, if we click on this, yeah, and we have to convert this modal to detect whether we're editing a piece of editing a documentation section or adding a new one. And then what else did I have on here? I had, yeah, wire up, drag and drop ordering and persistence of adding to a section. So that's basically making sure that when we reorder everything, the navigation is going to stay in the correct order. And then we probably won't get to these two tonight, but maybe we'll get lucky because we're starting to get to that point where we've got a lot of boilerplate code and we don't have to, really fuss with a bunch of stuff. So what I think we're going to do is dig into this section stuff and then we'll kind of color in around it and see where we get. But I think that's a good way to do this so that way we're not getting too far off base from our goal of getting this wired up. So I'm going to clear that. What do we got here? We got CMS, API docs, CMS. And if you haven't been watching these yet, or this is the first one you're watching, basically what I say every time we start is there's going to be anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes of me just kind of mumbling and saying like, okay, where were we at? What were we doing? What's a good starting point? And then digging in. So I always say that's a really good thing for you to do or to adapt is to not worry about having to jump straight back into a project, but saying like, okay, let me give myself a little bit of wiggle room here to get I call it getting the hamster moving. So get the hamster on the wheel going and figure out where you need to be and then dive in. Now, hopefully this goes a little quicker than we have been tonight because we're starting to get some structure to this. So let me get oriented here. So we've got, I don't think I closed any of this out from the last session we did. No. So we've got documentation. So this file that I've got open is this page, the entire thing. And then we've got our modals. So the page modal is the thing that we invested most of our time in last week. So do I still have it open? I do. So we need the documentation section modal because that is going to be the first thing that we do. And I guess that's it for now. Just those. So let's close all this other stuff. And then whatever we need, we'll bring it back up. All right, so make sure you guys can see all this stuff. Yep. Got that. You can see the browser okay. Yes, you can. Okay. Documentation section modal. So what we did, I think it was 2 or 3 streams ago now, is we started to set up our databases, or our database on the server with multiple collections. So remember that we've got documentation. So that's the actual project. So our example has been Next.js boilerplate. So the documentation for the Next.js boilerplate. We've got documentation pages, which are individual pages that may or may not belong to a section. And then we've got sections, which are potential sections inside of a documentation project, if you want to use a terminology that way. So what I want to do is wire up the back end first to make sure this works smoothly. And we can pretty much steal, at least I think we can, yeah. So we're going to steal this mutations file from documentation pages because the behavior is roughly the same here. The only thing that's really changing is the data. So I'm going to take this, and this, yeah, we did this last time. And we can see that we're using the post collection. So before we did have a documentation pages collection. I think we still have it. We got to get rid of that. Yeah. But we switched it to, let me get that back open. We switched it to post because that is where I store all of the content for the site. So I have different types for the different types of posts in that collection. So I've got like a tutorials post, an opinions post, meta post. And what we did last week, and we can see it here, is we added a documentation type. So we're just making reuse of that collection and that data model and the UI that's tied into it and all that stuff without having to do a lot of extra work. And that was the thing that 3/4 of the way our last stream, I realized like, oh, I'm wasting our time adding all this extra stuff that we don't need. We can just reuse this model. So that's what's going on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, come over here to documentation sections, paste it in, and then I'm going to change this. So we're going to say create documentation section. We'll do something similar to that. So I'll say do a section ID. What else we got here? Okay, so now I got to actually think. So there's a documentation sections, insert one. And I don't think we're going to need any of that, but I'll just keep it temporarily here. So let's look at our types. So what do we have on these things? We've got an ID, title, slug is generated in a documentation ID. Okay, so what I'll do, copy that. And we'll say, okay, well, we know documentation section ID. Title, we're going to pass that in from the client. So we got to think a little bit ahead here. So honestly, it's kind of random with me. Sometimes I'll start with my UI, like if I'm still trying to figure out what my interface is going to be like. Sometimes I'll start with the back end. Usually the one that I pick to start with is the one that I'm least certain about. So in this app, technically speaking, the UI is already figured out because we're using Bootstrap. I'm not doing any custom UI or anything like that, so I don't have to think through any custom UI as it relates to the data on the back end. So I can start with the back end because it's like, well, that side I'm a little less certain of what we need to do. So, and again, it's completely arbitrary. There's no real science to it. So if that sounds like BS, it's because it is. So we're going to say args.title pass to getSlug. And remember, we've got this helper function getSlug that takes some title and turns it into this. So that's a slug. That's, I don't know, I guess you call it a slug because it kind of looks like a slug trail, but I think it's like an old newspaper term or something like that. Okay, so we've got title, slug. Okay, documentation ID is also going to come off of Args. So we're going to iArgs. There we go. I hesitated because I'm trying to get used to a new key mapping on my keyboard. Because I had a weird, so when I jumped to the end of the lines, it was, yeah, it's doing that. Because I changed my hotkeys and it all turned to a mess. So if you see me kind of blankly stare down, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to remember how this thing works. So, okay, so we've got our section ID, which we're generating. We've got a title, slugified version of the title, and we expect to pass in a documentation ID. Yeah. We're not doing any created ats or anything like that, because really these are just wrappers. Yeah, they don't really have any purpose beyond organization. So that one's pretty simple, which is what I was hoping. So we're going to save that. And then we got to jump back over to, so remember, this is the Node.js server boilerplate. So if you haven't heard about that yet, or you don't know what I'm talking about, head over to github.com/cheatcode/nodejs-server-boilerplate. That's what this app is based on. We're not using the boilerplate verbatim. So this app, this API that I'm using for CheatCode, that was the prototype for the boilerplate that you folks have. So technically what's on GitHub is a little bit better, a little more organized, but the patterns are similar enough that whatever I cover here, you're going to be able to understand it when you clone it and work on your own project. So what we need to do is take this mutations file that we just created under documentation sections and load it into the GraphQL schema. And that's like the central hub for all of our data, at least as far as GraphQL is concerned. We want to centralize everything into one place. And that's what tells GraphQL and the client what it actually has access to. So, what did I just create? Create documentation section. So let's pull this in. And we're looking for our root type mutation. And remember, we've got two sides to this. So we've got the type definition. So on the root type mutation, we need to define the possibility for a mutation that we want to run. And then we'll do this in a second. And then we need to load our resolver function or functions, which is everything on the object here. So all of these methods are our resolver functions. And the way that this is set up with the ... and all that stuff, that's just my own organization pattern for a GraphQL schema. So that I like to break stuff into parts. So that's what we're doing here. But we'll explain that in a second. So what we need to do is... All right, alphabetical. Yeah, close enough. Okay, so we've got some args. So what do we have in here? We had title, string, which is going to be required. We had, I remember, a documentation ID, which is an ID. It's required. And remember that in GraphQL, ID and string are equivalent. The only difference is that that tells us, the developers, that this is an ID. But we still anticipate it to be a string, and so does GraphQL. So what did I say? No, that's right. Title and documentation ID. Okay. Yeah, because everything else is on the server. So this is going to return documentation section. And so here, this is returning this type, or we're setting the expectation that it's going to return data that's in the shape of that type. There's a better way to say that. And in our case, so let's save that. Did I spell everything right? That's usually the thing that gets me. Title, documentation, ID. Yes. So back here. Yeah, so we're just returning an object with an underscore ID field. And if we look at our type, we have an ID field here. So those two match, which means that when we run this mutation, GraphQL is going to, I guess the word is accept the response value from us. It's not going to return null for anything because we're actually matching the type that we told it we're going to return. And in case it's not clear why that's important, so I think we talked about this last time. Basically, the beyond the hype of GraphQL, so you hear everybody say, you got to use GraphQL, but the why is important. So the why is that it gives you a very, or well, I should say relatively rigid structure around your data and your data models. So it's a little more predictable how the data in your application flows. Some people dig it, some people don't. I've grown to really love it, but you know, to each his own. So we got to pull in, this is the part that I forgot. So we got to do documentation section mutations. GraphQL Mutations. And if you're wondering where is our queries file, I don't think we have one yet. No, file exists, but we don't have anything in it. So we'll maybe come back to that because I think there might be a way to consolidate some of this stuff together in terms of doing the query, so to pull it back for the UI, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Where am I looking at? Right here. I'm going to say documentation section mutations. Okay, so now when this loads and see it pop up here. This is annoying. So I should call this out because I figured this out the other day. I thought I did something really, really wrong in the boilerplate, and it turns out there's something in the what do you call it? The MongoDB Node.js package. So they call it their driver. That's the word I'm looking for. So the MongoDB driver for Node.js, they've got this funky output that's in there that makes you think you're doing something stupid, but it's in there. And I haven't checked for the versions yet. So if you clone a copy of the boilerplate and you see that, it's not you, it's the dependency. And if you want to jump ahead of me, I would say try and update MongoDB, the npm package that's in the package JSON. See if you get around that. I don't know if they fixed it yet. Okay, so the reason I pulled that up, but I realized, well, technically I got around the problem that would have shown up here, but let me see if I can do it. So I'm going to get rid of that import real quick here, and we'll see if we can trigger this error. No, really? That's kind of surprising. Is it the other way around? Let's see. I really want to show this because this is a common problem and it's something that trips a lot of folks up. Trips me up. There it is. Okay, so what I just did is I got rid of the definition for the mutation field create documentation section here under the root mutation type, but I kept the resolver. So when GraphQL has that happen, what it does is it says mutation create documentation section is defined in resolvers, which is down here. So resolvers, this is our mutation resolvers. So it's defined in resolvers, but it's not in the schema. So when it says that, it means the root type mutation up here is the schema that it's talking about. So wanted you to see that because that'll get you if you've never seen it before. Okay, so what do we got next? All right, so we've got that wired up. That should basically do it for the back end because for this part, it's not too crazy. So let's go back to the CMS. And in the documentation section modal, I vaguely remember us going through and renaming all this stuff. I think we did it at the same time we did the page modal because we copied this from the courses part of the CMS. So I'm hoping that that's the case. Looks to be. And there's no redirects or anything here, so we don't have to deal with that. We only care about that. Okay, so let me update our list here. What am I looking for? Oh, I don't have it. Okay, so we're going to add a new issue. So we're going to say add ability to fetch documentation contents. So all the list that we have right now back here, this is static. This is just hard-coded in HTML. So we want to swap that with a query so that when we actually create a page or when we actually create a section, we can see it show up in this list as opposed to looking in the database or just assuming that it exists. Fetch documentation contents for index page. Kind of a crappy description, but we know what it means, so that's all that matters. Okay, so we got add ability to fetch data. So that one we haven't completely finished yet, so we're going to finish that. Then I want to pull down the data for this, because then that gets us to the point where we can edit the section title, and when we do a refetch, we're going to see the updated title. We're not going to have to do a full page refresh. And then it also plays into this drag and drop. So I think we're going to get pretty far tonight. Let's see here. I don't want to place any bets, but I'm feeling it. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I'm feeling it. You got to feel it. I don't know what that means. I don't know who came up with that, but... Or what do the kids say nowadays? Oh, it's the vibe, man. It's the vibe. Shameful youth. Shameful youth. Okay. Enough ranting. So, yeah, let's do this, and then we'll go into the listing. So, create section. And I should be fair. It's not the youth's fault. They were raised by older generations who were goofy, and then it all just, you know. I feel you. I understand. It's rough out there. Okay, so create new section. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a submit handler. Validate. Okay, so we've got our validation on the title. That call, so that's why I'm getting confused, because we got to handle that later. So yeah, handle create, blah, blah, blah. Documentation ideas pulled off the props. That should be passed back here. So this is the root of the documentation where we render our modals. Yeah. So we've got everything I think we need. This may actually just work. See, I say that, and then it's just like, wah, wah, wah. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. Yeah, let's just try it. See what it does. If it blows up, it blows up. It's the beauty of the development environment, huh? Well, what do we call this? Ooh, there you go. That's, you guys can't hear it, but I play music in my headphones. If you like underground hip-hop music, check out Sage Francis. All right, how'd we do? Mutation option. Oh, boo. So I wired up all the server stuff for the mutations, but not the client. Mutation. Yep, we don't have it. Oh, we're pulling for court. We made the same mistake last week. Documentation sections. So this is the client side portion. So we got title, that's a string that's required. We got documentation ID. Just an ID that's required. It always gets me. Documentation ID. We return an ID, but like I was saying, we don't really need to refresh anything or redirect anything, so I don't think that's gonna really matter, but we'll pull it back anyways, because that's the shape of the type that we returned. What am I looking for? So we got that. So we got to change there. Go away. So we got to change this. Documentation sections. GraphQL mutations, documentation sections, GQL. That doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to copy it and just delete it. Okay, now the robot should be happy. Pull this back down. All right. Documentation. Oh, I know what that is. What's yapping about this? I saw it. There's little things like that that I'll see and then forget that I see them until I see the error message, and I'm like, oh, right. You forgot that, doofus. Yep. Where are we going? We're on one. So again, just real quick, Technically, we could do that, // and Node.js is going to resolve for index automatically. But to be clear, because it's just the // I'm going to include the keyword index in there. And if you want to send me a pipe bomb because I did that, sign up for the CheatCode newsletter at cheatcode.co/newsletter, and my mailing address is at the bottom of those emails. So send me a nice little care package like Ted Kaczynski and blow my hand off because I added indexed. That's crazy. Imagine. I was reminded of, I forget what I was listening to this morning, but is it John Hinckley Jr.? The guy back, I think it was like the 70s or 80s, who shot Ronald Reagan because he was trying to impress a 12-year-old Jodie Foster. I was like, holy crap, that's crazy. That's about on the same level. It's like, because I put an index, you're going to send me a Ted Kaczynski pipe bomb. I would give you some credit because I'd be like, well, that's dedication. All right. Enough dark humor. This is a happy place. So that should be fixed. It should shut up when we do this. Okay. And well, no sentence stand there like a mime. Let's check the database. Fresh all sections. That's promising. There it is. So we got our section. That was a lot smoother than last time. Okay, so you got the ability to create a section. Actually, I do want to jump back here real quick. So, oh yeah, that always feels good just to go done. Until you run into a bug and then your ego just gets smashed. And you're like, well, hopefully that one just works because it's simple enough. All right, so add ability to fetch documentation contents for index page. I'm going to close all this. We should get in the habit of doing that as we finish stuff. Just so it's a little easier to reason about all this stuff. So we're not going into modules. Say docs, documentation, index. Yes. Let's double click that so it stays open. Okay, so now what we want to do is wire up the query for this page to actually work. And it looks like we already spec'd it out to some degree. So if you're just starting to learn React and GraphQL and all this stuff, and you've worked with Apollo and all these gadgets and gadgets, typically you're going to get examples that are built with stateless components or function components. That's the word I'm looking for. So in this case, this is just my preference. I'm using a class-based component here. The end result is more or less the same. The difference in terms of what we're getting ready to do is if you're using a functional component, you're going to use a hook more likely than not to run your query. So Apollo client, which I gotta remember how this is organized. Yeah. So Apollo client exports, and this is actually from, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. So that package at Apollo/client exports a hook called use query and use mutations. So if we were in a functional component, that's what you would see. We're going to do it a little bit differently. So what I'm doing is just importing my GraphQL client instance directly into the class, and then we're just going to call all of this stuff inside of, technically we'll say component will mount, and then we'll also do it whenever we do a refetch. And let's ignore the refetch for a second. We'll come back to that because I did see that we wired it up in part. So let's import this from GraphQL client. And that's the, just to be clear, that's the connected client for the app. So when the app starts up, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, go ahead and connect to the GraphQL API that we've got running back here in the API. And so we establish the client connection and we export it from this file. That way we can just reuse it. That is passed down technically through, I think I do it in app. No, I don't. Maybe that makes sense, maybe not. Do I do it in document? Did we rip it out for this? We might have ripped it out. Oh, no. See, I was tricked myself. So this CMS was the prototype for the Next.js boilerplate. So I don't pass it the client down. So there's a, oh, what do they call those things? Provider. So you might see something like this in other people's code, something like Apollo provider. And you just pass client down to the tree like that. Perfectly acceptable way of doing it. So getting access to your GraphQL client, I'm just not doing that here. I'm doing the file import version of this right here. So let's uncomment that. And we're not going to pull that from props. So we got client.query, some query. Okay, so this I don't think we've written yet, and we actually have to think, how is this going to work? So yeah, this will actually be kind of cool to see. So we have to do, we have to do a map over the pages and then say group together the pages by the sections. And I might be able to show you folks a way to do this a little more efficiently, and then we'll use the client to do our mapping and connect all the dots. Yeah, okay. But let's finish this up real quick, or at least spec it out, and then we'll go up to the server. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So sometimes I start with client, sometimes I start with server. It's just arbitrary. But what am I trying to do? So I'm trying to say this is going to be, and I am in the right project, yes. Documentation.gql under queries. I'm going to say we may have already written this or spec'd it out. Yeah, I'm not gonna confuse this. Gotta be patient. Gotta be patient. All right, so we're gonna say documentation ID. Documentation ID. Now this is the tricky part. So am I gonna do that? Yes, tentatively, just so we have something here. So I'm gonna say let's return pages, and I'm even skeptical of my own decision making here. So what do we have? Excuse me, barking. Title updated at created. That's what you're thinking about. So we're going to get all of the pages, and we need to make sure we're clear here. So we're also going to want, if we're going to do it the way that I'm thinking about doing, which I'm realizing now is kind of stupid. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. So, well, documentation ID, we don't care. That's what you're thinking about, section ID. This will make absolutely no sense right now, but again, the hamster, he's got his little suit and tie on, he's got his calculator, and he's putting it together. You just gotta trust him. All right, and then I was gonna say sections separately. And again, this probably looks really stupid, but it does have a point. Is there anything else in this section? No. Well, yes, but no, not for this UI, so that doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the proof of concept, or the sketch, not really proof of concept. And why did I do that? So we got to load it. So typically I'll put my query files up at the top. And if you don't remember, the reason I'm naming it like this is because when you're dealing with imports at the top like this, especially in bigger components, it's harder to tell if the name is just documentation, what that means. That could be like a static JavaScript module called documentation. So basically what I'm getting is the further down in your code you go, if you have variables like that, you don't know what the hell it is. So I'll suffix things like that intentionally with what it is. So this is documentation, but what is it? It's a documentation query. So that just makes it that much faster to comprehend while you're working. What are we saying here? Queries. Documentation query. And then we need a documentation ID passed in the variables, which technically we have here. So what I'm going to do, jump up here real quick, say documentation ID. Pass that into this function. And then also set it on a state. Kind of unnecessary, but maybe helpful later. And that we can just use JavaScript shorthand. We don't need to pass it. So what I mean by that, if you've never seen that before. Technically, before ES6, I believe, that was how you would have to assign variables. So even if it had the same name, you had to write the whole thing out. Now you can just do shorthand. So if the name of the variable is the same as the property you're setting for an object, so this object here. So if those names are identical, you can omit the colon and the actual passing of the value. It'll just do it all in one go. So we can say client query, documentation query, we pass in our variables, and then we get back some data, and we don't really know what this is going to look like or do yet, so I'm just going to do a console log, and then we'll reason about how we got to handle that data. Okay, so that's part one of this equation done. Next is back up in the API. Let's go to here. Yeah, we kind of did this, kind of didn't. Docs, documentation, yeah, get rid of that. Okay, so we've got documentation. So something I will do when I got to do a bunch of like work within a task is I'll do one of these. So TDML is just my to-do multi-line comment snippet that I've got built into my editor. I don't know if there's a default one that's included, but this is how I'll reason through like, okay, now that you're at the point to implement this thing, what are the steps involved in that? And that helps me to reason about this a lot faster. So I need to, what? I need to get all of the pages for the docs, get the docs themselves, get the docs sections, and then what's in your head. So technically we're going to get back this, and we're going to have pages. It's an array. Yeah, okay, this is where I was getting confused before. So I was like, well, or do we want to call it, so let's see this as well. So basically have navigation, and you have, and this is just made up, this isn't legitimate yet. Just trying to decide what is the return value going to look like. Could do that. Yeah, that's pretty complex actually. Okay, but we could say documentation like that. That would just be the documentation itself. You're probably looking at me like, what the hell is he talking about? Again, gotta trust the hamster. Works in mysterious ways. And he loves Argyle socks. I always find them all over my house, stashed in the corners. He uses them for bedding. I'm sorry. You're watching this like, this is a serious job. We have to be serious. Who is this clown? The name is Ryan Glover. Don't you forget it. Okay. Oh, it's a full-time job, folks, I'll tell you. All right. Navigation. So what is the brilliant scheme here? So the brilliant scheme here is like, well, we know that all of our pages, technically at the database level, let's jump over there real quick, are top level. And I say top level in quotes like that obnoxiously because basically they're not in any real structure. The structure is derived from the IDs that exist or don't exist. So what I'm thinking is, well, these are all going to have an order eventually, and they're all going to have either a documentation section ID or not a section ID. So in theory, what we can do is this. I'm going to do this up here instinctively. So I'm going to say await documentation pages.find. And I'm going to say find all where documentation ID is args.documentation ID. So this is the documentation ID that we're passing in. Am I still recording? I am. I was noticing, if you're one of the folks that ends up watching these later, I was noticing the quality that YouTube records at was kind of crappy. So I'm doing a recording tonight. And once we wrap up or sometime tomorrow, I'll do an upload. So if you want to review this or watch it again or just reference something in here, there will be a better quality version between tonight and tomorrow. So we got pages, documentation pages, fine. And then we do, that's what I was after, to array. So we get our pages back. And this is regardless of publication status or anything like that. Son of a bee sting. Why am I upset? I'm upset because... No, I'm not upset. Okay. I was like, oh crap, we didn't update the pages, or the posts, but we did that last week. So that's correct. So again, when we create documentation pages, we're piggybacking on this post schema intentionally so we can get all the features of the post editor for free without having to rewrite all this stuff. So this isn't going to be documentation pages. This is going to be posts. Not that. I swear, this thing has some of the weirdest. What is performance observer? I don't know. Posts is what we're after. So we're going to say pull back all the posts for this documentation ID. Where am I? Boop, boop. And in this case, we just want the post index file, so that should do the trick. Yep. Okay, so we got our posts in an array. Hypothetically speaking, we gotta throw an async on there. Okay. So, hamster, activate. So we're going to say pages map. What's your point though? What do you want? I want this, but not that. But I do want that. There's a way to do this. What is it? Because you're basically saying like, well, I could filter it. Yeah, that might make this easier to understand for you folks too. So that query? Might have to do an OR query there. That's what I'm looking for. No, we talked about this. So it is going to exist. So this isn't going to be an exist. It's going to be an any for not equals. Null? I think it'll come in as null if it's not passed. But we'll find out pretty quickly because it won't make any sense when the data logs out. So let's do that. We'll say console log. To make this a little less cumbersome when we actually run it, just say return object. So in GraphQL will leave us alone, but we'll still be able to see that output in the server. So what was the train of thought here? So standalone pages, and I'll say section pages. Well, it's not. Is exists. That's a documentation question. Go to the old Stack Overflow. Oh, okay, it's a twofer. So you got to say exists true and it does not equal null. You can combine. Hot damn, you can combine them. Cool. Exists true. So to clarify on that. Well, go back. Okay, so what we're trying to say is find us all of the pages that are belonging to a section. So we're not worried about which one they belong to yet. We're just saying do they. So we're trying to separate those from the standalone pages. So what we're saying is in this documentation ID, find me the pages that have a section ID and the value of it is not null. And the reason we have to do that is because documentation section ID on the standalone pages will be set to null automatically. And so we're trying to avoid accidentally scooping those pages up alongside of our section pages. So I think that'll work. And what I'll do is just create a little object here temporarily. Say section pages, save all that jazz. Okay, so now let's make sure that this is loaded in the schema because I do not remember. Schema. Oh, we got documentation queries. Project slug. Oh, nah, that's kind of, I remember why we did that because we were starting with like slugs up in the URL and then I was like, this is a CMS, we can fudge it. So we're going to do that and let's make sure that matches. Yeah, so I'm looking right here. I want to make sure that the name and the type expectations, meaning the scalar type that we expect to be in there, and is it required or not? The answer is yes. And then we're saying documentation is being returned. So, but we got to modify that because it's not going to match what we're doing. So we've got ID title. That doesn't really matter anymore. What I have in mind is going to be really messy, so I was going to do this. No. That's sacrilege. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add an additional field called navigation, and we're going to call it documentation. Oh, I don't like that. I feel like I'm going to spontaneously combust. So why did you do that? Yeah, that's a better question. Because you're trying to do this, which is legitimate, but you're basically trying to say, like, what is my documentation and what is my navigation, so I can organize it better at the UI level. So what I just changed was, let me do this now before I forget. So documentation equals that. Do one, two of those. Okay, so we're saying get the documentation. Documentation. There we go. Okay, so the whole point of that goofiness was this. The reason I did that is because the expectation I just set here is that all of the top level fields are going to be that documentation object from the database. But back here, we have to say, okay, well, get that documentation object from the database, and then we use spread to make it top level on the object that we returned from the query. So that ultimately, even though it doesn't look like it right now, is going to end up matching this structure right here, which may change further because I don't like it. But we'll live with it. We're adults. Maybe. I don't know. If there's any kids here and your parents are watching, I apologize in advance. Actually, I'm kind of surprised. I don't think I've sworn at all. It's kind of impressive. Usually it's like, F this, S that, this is BS. If anybody saw how I work during the day, they'd have me committed. I can guarantee it. I sit here talking to myself. I'm cussing all the time. Throwing like little mini tantrums when something doesn't work, like a child. But it's constructive and it's productive. So, all right, enough blabbing. So, standalone pages, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do that. This I haven't figured out yet because I want to make sure that we're returning the correct value or the value I expect from there. Then we'll come back and do that. Okay, so this should be a happy camper. And if I'm just going to put type in here string just so it shuts up. It might yell at us for having a type with no fields. Okay, and we already set up the client to have some level of expectation. But we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to shift back. We're going to say navigation type. That should play nicely, and if not, we'll get an error in the console and we'll fix it. And this should be running on mount. Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, not this again. I'm actually surprised. Why did that cause a crash? Uh-oh. I think I just knocked you guys off. There we go. I just wired up a bunch of hotkeys for all my screens. There you go. So I'm actually surprised that this caused the whatchamacallit, Next.js server to crash. Cannot query field documentation section ID. All right, let's restart that. If it crashes again, then it'll probably make a little more sense. I might be doing some SSR there, so that's why it freaked out. Says started. There it goes. Oh, come on, Grandma. Yeah, okay. So there's something in the SSR is freaking out. So, cannot query field documentation section ID on documentation. And I know what that is. So that's here. And that is correct. So that was from my original expectation of how this would work. But there you go. All right. Let Grandma get her scooter warmed up. I don't hate old ladies. I actually love old ladies. I swear I'm nice to strange old ladies in public. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, it's another error. Variable documentation ID if required, type ID. Okay, alright. What is the madness about here? This is SSR Fooey. And we don't care about SSR in this case, so I'm going to do reluctantly this little number. Is it a function or does it just return the value? It's a function. The one in, I believe, the Next.js, but I got to quit doing that. I keep turning you folks off. You can hear me talking, but I'm moving my thing. All right. What is question ... syntax you're using first time I see? Oh, give me 1 sec. I will explain. Paste that stuff back in. You're talking about this stuff. So this is shorthand. I think it's called optional chaining in the JavaScript specification. Don't quote me on that. So that is just a replacement for having to do this whole thing. So basically it's just saying if router exists, try and see. So if capital R router exists, check and see if lowercase r router exists, check and see if query exists, so on and so forth. So it's literally just a condensing of the and nonsense. Let me know in the chat if that answers your question. I can potentially give a better answer. Yeah. Okay. So we're saying is client, and we're trying to get around this stupid SSR error. And I'm hoping that does it. So it's basically just saying like, do not run this code unless you're running in the browser. And that's because we don't really care if it runs in the server of the client, because it's just a backend tool. It's not something that's dependent on SEO or anything like that. Though these will be dependent on SEO, so we will have to be more mindful of stuff like that. All right. And survey says you gonna work? Maybe. Whew, there we go. Okay. So we're fetching documentation. Did it fetch it? Got something back. Good. So now we want to go back to our API. Okay. Now, the reason this failed is, so notice, by fail, I mean that it didn't return any data or it didn't find any documentation pages, because we're reliant on this part of the URL. So right now, tester does not exist as docs. So what we got to do is go to our database, open this up, and do we still have, yeah, we do. We have Next.js boilerplate. So I'm going to copy this ID and just manually put it in to the URL, but later, hopefully we'll get there because we're actually moving along tonight. When we list out the documentation projects that are available, we'll just automatically append the ID to the URL. We won't have to do all this stuff. But for the sake of testing, that's what we're doing. Sans quotes, because we do not need those. Okay, but no response, really. Why am I'm skeptical of that. Did I not save something? Okay, so this is where I would debug the API side of this and say, what am I messing up? So let's just check. So first thing I always check is my arguments, make sure I'm passing in what I think I'm passing in. Sometimes I misspell something or don't actually give it, so it breaks. Okay, so we have a documentation ID. Oh, but we may not have any, we don't have any pages yet. So let's create some pages. What do we listen to? Flaming Lips. Create new page. Objects are not valid as, what do you, that wasn't a problem before. Oh, weird, it like went in the background, but. Does it do it on a whole hard reload? No. What if I go back? And do we get the pages? Not that I'm seeing. All right, let's check at the database level and make sure I didn't mess something up. So it should be this one. No. Let's do this. Let's say created at the last page it has is water bottle. Or huh? Something's broken. Oh, okay, I'm an idiot. Did I do it again? No, I said post. Okay, so maybe the query's wrong. So let's, I'm gonna pull this over here. Yeah, because we don't need our to-do list on top. Let's close all this because that's confusing me. Let's sort this, created at -1. So what that's doing is putting the latest stuff on top. Okay, so there's Flaming Lips, type documentation. Documentation ID is correct, and section ID. So what you yapping about? Well, that's not the problem, but I am going to add that just to be extra paranoid. Let's say, okay, make sure we're only pulling back documentation posts. Oh, well, I'm an idiot. That's why. Yeah. I'm saying only give me back the post if documentation section ID does not equal null. But that's not what I want. Let's say you robot, you can work. There it is. Okay, yeah, this is a bad query. Oh, we did have one in there. Should work. Okay. Onward. Okay, so section pages is a little more difficult to do right now, but we do need to do it. So what I'm going to do is, I think this one is for this documentation. No, but we can make it that. I'm debating. I'm like, well, oh, I did it again. Hey, I quit doing that. All right, we're going to have to rewire that hotkey. I keep looking over and seeing like, be right back. Still here. I'm still talking. What do I have? Oh, I know what it is. I gotta clean up my key mappings. It's all over the place. So I have my I think. So it doesn't do it here, but if I'm on this screen, how bizarre. Anyways, so what I was debating is, do I want to create the section via the GUI? Because we technically wired that up earlier. And then I'll manually set the ID on that one. Or set that ID. Yeah, let's do that. No, we already used water bottle. There you go. Create a new section. We're not worried about rendering or anything yet. There is a bug, though. We'll have to figure that out. Okay, so this should be assigned to the correct documentation. Yes. Okay, so now we want to copy this section ID. And where am I looking? Copy value. And then we want to go to our posts, run this query. So we got that one. Documentation test. So I'm going to put the Flaming Lips one on that section ID. And then we can start to reason through how this is going to actually run the query, which will kind of work and kind of not, but hopefully by the end of tonight, it's still pretty early, we'll have that making some form of sense at the code level. So all I want to see now is, do we get back standalone pages and section pages correctly, and then we'll worry about the actual structure of all that stuff. So back here, this is, I feel like something's being set on state and trying to render, and it's freaking out. Okay, that's looking good. Nice. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's when I change my terminal. All right. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can change that while we're live. Can I get rid of that? Yeah, who? I don't have it mapped. What are you yapping about? Hold on a second. So I do that. What, am I hitting another key and I don't realize it? Do I have something mapped to 4? Yes, that's what it is. Okay. All right, so now if I do, because full screen on my code. All right, no more random drops. To be right back. I'm not going away. Don't worry. Still here. Okay, so back in our API. There we go. Okay, so yeah, you can see it. So standalone pages and section pages are coming back separated now, which is what we wanted. So what we got to do is, on our actual return value, so up until now we're just returning an empty object, we got to work with this data. So what I was thinking, and this is probably going to be kind of stupid. Oh, well, I'm not really thinking here, am I? Yeah, because what you're trying to do, we don't have this, but this will maybe start to make some sense. So we're going to have standalone pages, and then we want to have sections. The sections are that's what I was missing earlier. So the sections are responsible for containing potentially child pages. So we want to combine those two together to form the thing. We just have to, I see how to do it. Okay. So I'm going to write some potentially messy code to start, and then we'll refactor it. no, so this is going to be a type of page. So this, did I get rid of it? No, I did. So I'm trying to basically mimic this. So what I'm going to do is add type page. Our pages shouldn't have types. Or our posts shouldn't have types. Ah, son of a bee sting, they do. All right. Oh, I hate stuff like this. And we do need the type back on the query because we need to make sure it's a documentation page. Well, we do that. I can live with that. So we'll say standalone, true or false. Yeah, because we can still use that in the UI. May not look like it makes sense, but it'll get us there. So we're going to say section. Now, we don't have sections yet, in case you're confused. Like, where is that coming from? It doesn't exist yet. So we're going to say standalone false section. Now, this is the tricky part. And this is where I was like mulling over in my head earlier. I'm like, how the hell is that going to work? But we can do some James Bond shit and do it like this. So we're going to say standalone pages, standalone page, standalone true, standalone page. Yes, so that gets you something close to that. Then section, yeah, so section is going to be standalone false, but it's going to have a pages array in there. So my thought process was get rid of this. Or, well, not get rid of it, move it. And we're in a map, which means we can use an async await on this. So what I want to do is basically say, okay, go and get me all of the sections, and for each section, get me that section's pages if they exist. So we're going to say type documentation. Documentation ID stays on there, but now the sneaky part is we can say section dot underscore ID because we're mapping over one section up here. So we can basically say, okay, give me the post for that section ID. And then we get a structure that's going to look similar to that guy. So before I walk us through how all this is working and why it's working, let me make sure that it actually works. I think it'll work, and it looks like it'll work, and it's pretty tidy, which is cool. And it looks cool. Looks like a Pac-Man game. Hey, speaking of Pac-Man, little guy at the bottom of the screen, running for his dear life. Can't catch a break. Okay, yeah, I think, okay, so we need sections. So standalone pages stays the same. That doesn't go anywhere. Sections is going to be documentation sections. Do we get an auto import? Yeah, but it cased it wrong. Okay. So we got documentation sections. There's nothing like that. And there's nothing like that. It's just what are the sections for this documentation ID? And in case you're wondering about order and all that stuff, we'll come back to that because we don't even have that in the schema. So we'll refactor this code a little bit later. So we got standalone pages, sections. I'm thinking this whole doodle will work. Fingers crossed. Just for my own sanity, I'm going to log it out up here so we can verify it, but I think that'll do the trick. That we verified is correct, so we don't have to do anything with that. Okay. Let's see what we get. Okay, didn't freak out. Did I not? Oh, what am I forgetting? Promise.all. Ooh, that's actually a tricky one. Yes, but no. Why is that? Can I do that up here? Well, I gotta be careful. I always trick myself with that. So the ones that don't have promise don't matter, but this should help that one. And I'll explain what promise.all does in just a sec. Maybe. Oh, duh. You gotta await the promise.all because you're basically trying to say, like, well, await until all of these promises resolve, and we have to wait because of this guy right here. All right, 50th time's a charm. There we go. So we get standalone true, standalone false, test section, Beastie Boys, I think that was our section, pages array. So when I get something like this in my terminal where it says array like that, which is really annoying, what I will do is wrap the console log with a stringify, but I won't just do stringify. You can pass another parameter to stringify. I forget what the null is, but the 2 means space it out in 2s, because normally when you do stringify, it just squishes it all together. That null 2 gives it actual spacing, so it makes it look like the actual object. So it gives it 2 indentation spaces. So let's refresh. There we go. And there we go. So that's what I was shooting for. So, and the reason why is because now this is very easy for us to render back on the client, because all we have to do now is just map over it and say, okay, if it's a standalone page, render one of the page rows, so one of these guys. If it's a section, render the section, and then all of the pages are nested underneath it, so it's just the same exact thing. It's just recursively walking down till we get everything rendered. So that should do it, and then the order should play nice with this, because remember, there's going to be kind of a freaky deaky order here. So there's the order of the standalone pages plus the sections, and then within a section there's also the order of those pages in that section. So that we got to play with, but we're just about there. So if we look on the client, did we get that response value? Bitch sweet cheeks, we did. Now, I call that documentation navigation item reluctantly, and I know why now, because well, no, I don't know why. Son of a bitch. Okay, so this is the only thing I don't like about this. So the standalone boolean's fine. What don't I like? Oh, well, okay. So this goes back to the original sketch or the original type that I wrote out. So what I'm going to do, because documentation, we're only using this here, I'm going to say, let me make sure I do this right. Put those next to each. Actually, let's split that. What was I just thinking? So we gotta have, can I do that? Well, let me just scroll up. There you go, that's good enough. Okay, so what I was thinking is, well, well, I'm confusing myself. So no, I take that back. That part's correct. The documentation part, this is what I'm messing up. Documentation navigation item. So this, that name is actually fine. I'm not gonna stress about that now. This is gonna have, there you go, standalone boolean. That's why I was getting confused. Standalone, but this is the part that I wanted to change. So it's either a page in the shape of a document, or in the shape of a post. I gotta be careful here. Yeah, in the shape of a post, or, and this won't make sense yet, but it will get there. Or it's a section in the shape of a documentation section. So what we're gonna change here is, instead of spreading that out, we're gonna say, okay, well, this is a page. So all we're doing is, just so the types play nicely, we're just nesting the thing that we're mapping over in the navigation. We're basically just saying, okay, just nest that under a field that describes what it is. That's it. So it just makes it so we can do this. We can say, okay, if there's a page property, it's going to be in the shape of a post object. If there's a section, it'll be in the shape of a section. That makes it easier for us back here on the client, when we do our query, to ask for the fields specifically back for the page and the section without it being too messy. So page there, section here. Now we can use shorthand. Now pages on a section. And so this, we're going to go back to the sections type. And we're going to add pages to this in the form of an array of posts, because that's what it is. Look at that beautiful type composition. And you know what would be good is if I actually did this on the return value, so I don't confuse the hell out of us. And then wonder why it's not working and get into a fit of rage. Oh, come on, prettier, kick in. Oh, I got a comma. That should be a little bit better. What say you? Nice. All right. And we should be getting close to a render here. And it's only 8:30. I like that. 8:30 my time, Central Time. Okay, yeah, there's some goofy error with that, because I bet if I rerun this again, it doesn't do that. Oh, it does do that. Oh, it's one of these goofy errors, so it's can't query field type on documentation navigation item. What is the... Oh, no, that was a problem. It's not a problem. Okay, so what's it yipping about the type? I'm not sure. What are you upset? Well, hold on. Did it log it? No. Oh. This. Okay, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so now we gotta be careful here. So ID, title, update, okay, so all that's fine. Navigation is fine, but now we gotta say standalone page. Oh, no colon there. This isn't a JavaScript object. This is a GraphQL query. So what do I need here? I need a page ID, so we can use that for the key. We need a title. And what I think I've got updated it and created it in there. Okay, and then now sections are a little friendlier. This is one of those situations where GraphQL is really cool. Stop putting, that's weird. I never do that. All right. What do we get? I didn't freak out. What do we get here? There we go. So we get our page. Get a section on this one, but page is null. Yep, page is null. This one should be a section. Cool. All right, now the only thing that I don't like is that I think this Beastie Boys one should have something for pages. Yeah, it should. So what's the problem? I'm going to comment that log just in case that's the troublemaker. Standalone, section, pages, await post stuff, fine. Let's get rid of this log because the log looks right. There you go. All right, how about now? Oh, did I ask for it back correctly? Pages, is it called pages? Yes. Standalone section. Standalone sec. Oh, because pages isn't nested. Wait, huh? Wait, huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like that. Because it might have pages if it's standalone false. And that was intentional, so that should be okay. Yeah, we know. I don't want to use that. There's too many hotkeys. All these hotkeys. Alright, something else break. Cannot query field pages on type documentation navigation item. Okay, so go back here. Okay, and that's correct. So I made a mistake earlier. This is incorrect. We don't need to modify the documentation section type. We need to do that. Now it makes sense. Kind of. That's one of those weird ones that like it looks decent in the code, but then the types, it just something seems wrong about that. How about now? Good. All right. So there it is. Cool. Okay. So now, hopefully this is making sense. This is going to start mapping really nicely to this UI. So we can start to render this in the UI. So we'll be able to see all this stuff show up here. Then we get into the trickier part, which is the drag and drop sorting, which may or may not be difficult. But we should try it. That was a good little dupe. I like it. Okay. So, let's go back to CMS. Back here. Okay, so now this is just a question of what do we want to do with this data. So, gut instinct tells me to put it on state because you're going to have to modify that state in relation to the drag and drop. That'll make it easy to do your database hits after you make a change. At least that's what I'm going to tell myself. So, and what is it coming back as? Data.documentation. So we want to say, let's just do documentation. And we don't need that because that's how I used to do it. But now that we have this nice little thing, just do documentation like that. Pop one of those guys on there, forget measure. So now we've got documentation on state. And we should have documentation.navigation. Yeah, okay. And we do want the full documentation because we're going to have to render stuff like that title. So we're going to say, I think I can get away with this. Kind of messy, but it'll prevent some headaches. So if I replace this and we still see Next.js boilerplate when this renders, it's working. Looks like it's working. Let's do a hard refresh. Nice. Okay, so that means that our navigation should play pretty nicely too. I don't know what that's about. We'll ignore that. The thing we care about is right here. Yeah. This will be a fun one to walk through. So we're going to say documentation.navigation. So that's our array of all those objects we came up with, all this jazz. So now we need to render that out, but we got to do it conditionally. So I'm going to kick that into a function body. And we need to know, so I'm going to do this instinctively, but we'll change it. Yeah. So I'm going to split this off into functions just so our main render function stays clean. So I'm going to say if it's standalone, so standalone true. So we're going to say render standalone page. Otherwise, this dot render section. Actually, I take it back. We're not going to change that. We're just going to say rest of navigation. So what this is doing is basically saying, okay, for each of those navigation items in that array, so documentation navigation, so did it still show up? No. So each of these, so these objects with standalone section, pages, or standalone page on it, what we're going to do is say, okay, pluck off standalone. So we're using, this is called destructuring in JavaScript. So we're saying pluck off the standalone property, right, as a variable so that we can reference it. And that's what we're doing here. We're referencing it by saying, okay, is standalone true or false? but we don't need to pluck off the rest of that object, so we can use a spread operator, or this is technically a rest operator. So the name is interchangeable. It just depends on the context where you're using it. So if you're collecting or gathering, and this is where the name comes from, so gathering the rest of the object, ... is like scooping, and then when you're trying to apply those items to another object, it's spreading it out. So it's either like scooping up the rest of it or spreading out onto a new object. So that's the idea there. So we want to take the rest of that item without standalone, pass it to one of these two functions to say spit out the corresponding UI right here. So now we'll just go wire those up, and this should stay relatively tidy without a lot of hoopla. Hoopla? I'm going to go down to the soda shack later. Hoopla. Yeah. We all get old eventually, I guess. Makes me kind of sad. Hoopla. That really is bothering me. That I just instinctively said hoopla. Oh, well. Alright, so I'm going to spit the dates out here, but... Wait, what's the order? The nested one has it. Updated at, then created at. Because we care technically more about what's updated first. Or when this has been updated first. And that is going to look goofy, so in case you're wondering, like, why would I just log out a timestamp? Patience. We will get there. And I'll show you a neat little helper that is included in the boilerplate to help with that. Okay, so that's our standalone page. Now we need a section. So we're going to call that section instead. Then we got to get our markup for the section, which is this turkey. This a biggin'. Oh yeah, we got to be real careful. Yeah, this is exactly why I wanted to do this, because it's so friggin' big. So what I'm going to do in VS Code, if you highlight the opening tag, opening of a tag, it highlights the end of it so you can see it. It's very subtle. I don't know if you can see. Let me go back. So if I highlight that, so it highlights it here. It draws like faint little boxes around there, but it also, right here, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but very faintly here on line, what is that, 202? There's like a little box that I can see that tells me, okay, that is what I'm looking for. And then I just copy that, so we'll have to delete that when we go up there. It's okay. We all make mistakes, even the hamster. That's kind of a cool nickname, sort of. No, it's not. No, that's like the dude who like doesn't shower in high school or something. It's like, oh man, it's the hamster. Watch out, guys. Here comes the hamster. Nah. Change plans. I'm not calling myself the hamster. Man, this is, I'm gonna have to go back and watch this. There's some great little I don't know what you call them. Random streams of consciousness. The hamster. Oh boy. If you're a fan from the Meteor Chef days, you'll remember that I had an obsession with the word turkey for several years. Still kind of do. It's a fun animal. Alright, so we're going to say section, title. That will come into play later, so we'll ignore that. Now, that's the table head. Oh, there it is, right on schedule. Okay, so now we got to be careful. So this is going to be another map over that section's pages. So, oh. We got to be really careful here. This isn't what I think it is. It is, but it isn't. So this, let's extend this up. So just be clear. So this section object that we're passing in to render section is this. And I just said section.title, which doesn't exist. Technically, it's section.section.title. So we got to be very careful here. So what we're going to do, kind of hesitantly, because this could cause a runtime error. Could, being the key word there. So I want to say section like that, pages like that, which actually works out because then down somewhere here, we could say pages map. There you go. I'm going to say ID, title, updated at, created at. Same thing with these dates. We'll come back to this as soon as we get verification that this is working. Okay. Not perfect, but not horrible. Do we still have hard-coded stuff? I think we do. And that would make some sense out of the chaos. Yes, we do. Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, the code's not that bad. Tidies that up nicely. How about now? Okay, so the section worked, but not the standalone, which is surprising because I would expect the standalone to work fine. Oh, same problem. Okay, so here I did this, but again, we have a nested page that we're not respecting, so none of that stuff exists. So it is rendering. Notice how it's an empty row. It's rendering it, but it doesn't know what to do with it. And it looks like we have like a phantom section as well. Where is that? That one's going to bug me. It's not there. Components. Oh, maybe it does exist. It just doesn't have anything yet. Okay. So, train of thought. What do they call hamster food? Is it just hamster food or like nutrition pellets? That's what they're going to be feeding us soon. Nutrition pellets. Get in the pod and eat the bugs. What a life. I was just blabbing on. What the hell was I thinking? Oh, right here. Page. Does that do it? There you go. Okay, so the only thing I don't like is this components, but I think that's actually correct at the data level. So what do we got? We got that one. Yeah, okay. So that's technically correct. So I'm just for the sake of sanity going to delete that, and then that should make a little more sense to you folks too. Look at that. All right. Old man Glover's getting tired, but, you know, I'm going to hang in there for you kids. You know, I go to my bedtime, you know, brush my teeth. I might do some reading, put on a little nightlight, you know, cuddle up in bed. Oh, that actually sounds really nice. Judge me however you want to judge me. I don't care. Okay, so let's do those dates. So the thing I was hinting at... Yeah, I'm still in the right file. I think I have that in here. Yes, I do. So I have a little file in... Now yours in the Next.js boilerplate should have quite a few more helpers. Yeah, actually we got to add one. So this is a great time to go to GitHub. We'll just pull it from the project. So if we go to lib at the root of the project and then dates. Oh, you don't have it either. Where did I do that? Is that in the site? Go behind the scenes to the site. You shouldn't see anything sensitive with me doing this. So this is the cheatcode.co site, but this is private. That's what I wanted time ago. I did this one a little bit differently because this one is, again, it's built in the same prototype way. That's what we want. And so the reason I had to do that too is it wasn't just adding an extra function. The way the dates library I'm using, day.js, works is you have to extend it, and it does that intentionally, so that's a little more performant in terms of the file size load. So you import what you need and leave the rest of the library out, which I kind of like. So that should give us now, from this dates library, a time ago that we can import. Lib dates. Now, if I can find the renders, there we go. We can just do that, and it should give us back a nice, pretty timestamp. Oh, too greedy. There you go. Maybe. 7 days ago. Oh, I guess, yeah, we did. This is the one we just did. Okay. So now, for the tricky part. So what time is it? 9? Well, let's think through it. So, you can kind of see it. I think that's what that is. Let's see if I change it. Yeah. So, that's going to be a bit of a thinker. I don't know if I got the juice for that. So the problem that we have to solve for is, again, we're mixing together pages, sections, and then sections have pages. So we need to know when we drag something, where is it going? So if it lands out here, meaning it lands on one of the standalone, or it lands in the standalone group, we need to know that it did that. So we have to actually be able to say, like, okay, who is this? And right now, when we do our drag and drop update, all it's doing is giving us the ID that we pass to data ID on each of the list items that we map out. So that gets a little tricky in terms of the sorts. So let's, at the very least, try and look. Well, no, because we can pass ourselves a context, I think. And you know what? There's other stuff. Maybe. So I don't know if those values actually exist. So that's actually a neat little trick that I use. and I'm too lazy to go look at the documentation for something, I'll just put placeholder words for where arguments would be, and then see if those arguments contain the thing that I'm after, and then rename it to the proper term. Yeah, there's something there. But what? So there's the sortable instance, and then there's the event. There's got to be like a group or an ID or something. Target? Source element? No, that's just the DOM. Is it inside of here? No. Oh, it's got to be in there somewhere. If not, we can make this up. I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm just looking for something that's going to reference. Okay, so I gotta fold and say, let's look at the sortable JS docs, because I don't remember. Is it this one I like? No, maybe. Yeah, this one. Does it allow us to set an ID? That's what I'm looking for. Look at the answers. No, which kind of sucks. Oh, well, you know what? We can. This is a little ghetto, but we can. Yeah, we can just tell ourselves here. No, we can't. Never mind. Because it's bouncing. Well, son of a bitch. It's bouncing all over the place, so we don't know which one it's landing on. Oh, well, I'm an idiot. Never forget that. Complete idiot. Because we have it right there. We know it's inherent. So whichever callback is firing is the one that we're modifying. Duh. So, I swear. I think one of my parents dropped me on my head. So we got pages. So that's our order, and then we have. Do we want to be fancy and say it's a destination? I hate when they say that. Welcome to your destination. I don't know why. Just a curmudgeon. I generally have a disdain for fake behavior, especially when it comes to airlines. Sound like a crazy person. Let's use destination just so later when we come back, I'll have another little fit over the word destination. I call lunatic. Okay, yeah, destination. So destination in this case is what? Well, let's use the same terminology. So, no, I'm not gonna do that. I was gonna say set it to standalone true false, and it's like that's not gonna make sense in this context well enough. And I don't have the patience for that nightmare. Yeah, we can get away with this. So here, let's change this log, and we'll verify this is the correct idea. So we'll say destination is section. Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's all okay. It's all right. I know where we are. Destination pages. Then I just had a light bulb, and then I forgot section ID. Yeah, that'll work. Because now that tells us, okay, we're trying to aim for a section. If we're aiming for a section, we do our database hit. Well, what's the section ID that we're changing or moving this into? What are the IDs? And then the order is inferred from the order of the array. So that'll work. Should work. I think it'll work. We're about to find out. Destination standalone pages. And just for good measure, I'm just going to say section ID null down here. I shouldn't have to do that, but that'll keep our API nice and clean, consistent. All right, so let's nuke our console. Nice. Oh, wait. Hold on. So I'm going to standalone. Oh, right. Okay, this makes sense. So when one list is changing, the if you're moving items between lists, both lists are going to fire their change event. So we're going to have to mitigate. We're going to have to mitigate or separate is the word I'm looking for. Separate the update for the section, which is what you want to do, because in the database we want to make sure we decouple the section ID from any post that no longer belongs to that section, and then also make sure that we add the pages to standalone. We might be able to ignore that too. So if we reverse this, pull that down in, so now standalone goes to 1, and the destination goes to 2. Technically correct, but it looks a little weird because we're not actually doing the updates, so it doesn't sync. So I'm going to say let's tap out there, because that's going to involve some thinking that I don't have the energy for. But that's a really good starting point for next time. And then let's go and look at our to-do list here. I'm going to count that one. We got that done. So we got to do documentation title. That's pretty straightforward. Drag and drop ordering persistence. That's what we're working on right now. Yeah, and then docs and the navigation, that's 5 seconds. List of projects, documentation, that's a few minutes. So I think we'll actually finish up the CMS part of this next week, which is awesome, because then we can finish up this, which will be relatively straightforward, because all we're doing is basically, we did the hard part tonight, which is figuring out that navigation pattern. So now we'll be able to do the same rendering of that navigation here. Rendering the content is easy. That's just pulling the content from the post. This I have a little script for, so generating the parts on the page, but we will have to do the current item. I shouldn't have clicked on that. Current item navigation. And then after that, search, and then I think we're done. So I think we've got maybe, I would call it 2 to 3 more streams on this. So we should be done before the end of the month, and actually see this ship into production. And I'm debating doing one of the streams on, let me kick back here. One of the streams on doing deployments. The reason I'm hesitating is because I've got a bunch of configuration and stuff, and to juggle all of that stuff live is going to be hard, because I use Kubernetes. So I've got a bunch of Kubernetes scripts, I've got key files, I've got all that stuff. So I'm going to have to go through it and see. But hopefully I can, because I do want to show you the deployment workflow that I use for all this cheat code stuff, and hopefully give you some hints on your own stuff. So thanks for hanging in there with me tonight. That was a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun joking around and getting that done, and we made a lot of very good progress tonight. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to dig into this drag and drop stuff and try and finish out the CMS part, so that way our focus shifts back to the actual docs and then finishing this out. And then we're going to build something else because these live streams are going to keep happening. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell too, because as soon as I go live, you can jump on, even if it's just for a few minutes, hang out, push that like button just so I know that you guys are watching and keep me going. But what I would also say is between now and the end of this, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you want to build next. So this one was just kind of a low-hanging fruit one for me just to get warmed up to doing this. But now I'm pretty comfortable with it, so I want to hear what you guys want to build. So different app ideas. Like one idea I've got is building a social network, kind of like a Twitter, but like doing it like a real app, not just doing like a, you know what I'm talking about, like those kind of like contrived apps that aren't that good. I don't want to do that, like actually design it, and I do have a design for something like that we could use. And I've also got a fun idea that's really abstract. I don't know if it'll work, so it may be kind of a goose chase, but doing like a programmer's notebook type of thing would be kind of fun. So I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think, what you want to see, if there's anything special that you want to learn or know how to build. And we will keep chugging with these live streams and build stuff out. So that's going to do it for me, folks. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Thanks for watching later if you're watching later, and I'll see you for the next one.